The sentence hit me like a thunderclap in a glass-walled office high above an American city. A truth so heavy it bent the air between us and made my heart forget how to beat for a moment. The baby growing inside her was mine, and in that instant the past, the present, and a terrifyingly beautiful future collided all at once, forcing me to face a life I never imagined was already waiting for me. Before the story goes any further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet miracles that change ordinary lives, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that need them most. My name is Caleb Turner, and until that day, my life had been built on safe routines and modest dreams. I lived in Columbus, Ohio, in a small apartment with beige walls and a second-hand couch, the kind of place you stay in when you are always planning for later, but never quite arriving there. I worked as a junior project coordinator at a fast-growing marketing firm, grateful for the paycheck, the health insurance, and the sense that I was finally climbing out of the uncertainty that had defined my 20s. My boss, Rachel Whitmore, was everything I wasn't: confident, composed, and respected. She carried herself with a quiet authority that never needed to raise its voice, and everyone in the office trusted her leadership. To me, she was a distant figure of professionalism, someone whose approval I chased through long hours and careful work, never imagining our lives would intersect beyond spreadsheets and deadlines. The truth was, my life had always been shaped by absence. My father left when I was 9, a suitcase and a promise disappearing down the driveway, leaving my mother to work double shifts and carry both love and discipline on her tired shoulders. I learned early how fragile stability could be, and I swore I would never bring a child into a world unless I could be certain I wouldn't fail them the way my father failed me. That vow became a quiet rule I lived by, guiding my choices, keeping me cautious, keeping me alone. Relationships came and went, never deep enough to risk real commitment, never strong enough to demand more than I thought I could give. Rachel's pregnancy was something the office whispered about in careful tones. She wore tailored jackets and flowing blouses, her posture strong, her smile steady, and no one dared ask questions. I noticed changes in her, small ones at first. She took breaks at unusual hours, kept ginger tea on her desk, and sometimes stared out the window with a softness that didn't belong to boardroom meetings. Still, it never crossed my mind that I was connected to it in any way. The night that changed everything had seemed insignificant at the time. A company conference in Chicago, a late dinner after too much stress and too many shared confessions about ambition and loneliness. It was a single mistake, brief and buried under professionalism when we returned home, something I told myself belonged to the past. Standing in that office months later, the weight of reality pressed down on me. Rachel looked at me not as a boss assessing an employee, but as a woman carrying a life that had reshaped her world. Fear flickered beneath her calm exterior, and I realized she had been carrying this truth alone, deciding whether to protect her career or acknowledge something deeply human. The office around us felt suddenly too small, the glass walls reflecting a version of myself I barely recognized. My first instinct was panic, a cold rush that asked how I could possibly become a father when I was still figuring out how to be a man. The days that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and relentless thoughts. I walked the streets of Columbus after work, watching families through lit windows, seeing bedtime routines and shared dinners that felt both comforting and painfully distant. Every doubt I had ever buried rose to the surface. I worried about money, about judgment, about the imbalance of power between us and what people would say. I worried most about repeating my father's mistakes, about becoming another man who disappeared when things got hard. The temptation to run was real, and it scared me how strong it felt. Rachel, meanwhile, faced her own storm. The board of directors watched her closely, investors questioned her focus, and the pressure to prove she could lead without compromise grew heavier each day. She never complained, but I saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the way her hand rested protectively over her belly when she thought no one was looking. We began meeting outside the office, not as boss and employee, but as two people trying to understand a shared responsibility neither had planned for. Those conversations were raw and uncomfortable, filled with long silences that spoke louder than words ever could. What surprised me most was how something inside me began to shift. One evening, Rachel invited me to attend a prenatal appointment, not out of obligation but out of quiet hope. Sitting in that dim room, hearing the steady rhythm of a heartbeat echo through the speakers, something cracked open in my chest. It wasn't fear anymore. It was awe. That sound was proof that life could emerge from chaos, that something pure could exist because of, not in spite of, our mistakes. For the first time, the future didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a calling. From that day on, I chose to stay, even when it was uncomfortable. I took on extra work, started saving every spare dollar, and moved into a slightly larger apartment closer to a park where I imagined teaching a child how to ride a bike someday. I told my mother the truth, expecting disappointment, but she surprised me with tears of pride, telling me that breaking cycles was the bravest thing a person could do. Rachel and I learned how to communicate honestly, setting boundaries, and building trust slowly, not as a fairy tale romance, but as partners united by something bigger than either of us. The challenges didn't vanish. Gossip spread, and not everyone was kind. There were moments when the stress felt unbearable, when Rachel questioned whether stepping back from her role was the right choice, and when I wondered if I was strong enough to support both her and a child. But with every obstacle, we found small victories. A shared laugh during a late-night planning session. A gentle kick felt through my palm. A sense that we were no longer facing the world alone. As the months passed, the city seemed to change with us. Autumn gave way to winter, and then to a hopeful spring. We prepared a nursery painted in soft blues and warm grays, assembling furniture with awkward teamwork and quiet smiles. I read parenting books on my lunch breaks, highlighting passages about presence and patience. Rachel learned to let go of perfection, trusting that leadership could look different, softer, without being weaker. Together we discovered that love didn't have to be loud to be powerful. Just before the baby arrived, I stood alone in that same office where everything began, watching the sun set over the skyline. I realized how far I had come from the man who feared responsibility more than failure. Becoming a father wasn't about having all the answers. It was about showing up, choosing courage over comfort, and believing that broken beginnings could still lead to beautiful endings. If this story is starting to stir something in you, if it reminds you of your own fears, hopes, or second chances, please take a moment now to engage with this video. Like it, share it, and let us know your thoughts. Your interaction helps keep stories like this alive and reaching those who need them. The day our child was born, everything else faded into the background. Holding that tiny life in my arms, feeling a grip no bigger than my finger hold on with surprising strength, I understood what redemption truly meant. It wasn't about erasing the past. It was about transforming it into a foundation for something better. Rachel's eyes met mine, filled with exhaustion and wonder, and in that shared glance was a promise that we would keep choosing love, even when it was hard. Before this story ends, I have a special request for you. Please comment below and tell us where you're watching from and what this story made you feel. Your words matter more than you know. Life doesn't always begin with perfect timing or flawless decisions. Sometimes it begins in moments of fear, wrapped in uncertainty, asking us to rise to the occasion. I didn't plan to become a father the day my boss revealed the truth, but I chose to become one in every way that mattered. And in doing so, I found not just a future, but a purpose that finally felt like home.